Okay, we're live. We're live.
Thank you. It is January 17th, 2023, 6:05 p.m. at the auditorium. This is the Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission regular monthly meeting. That's it. A roll call, please. Sue?
Yes. Mark Ingram,
Here.
Mary Ellen Griffin,
Here.
Ruth Hager,
Here.
and Sue Hubbard is here. Ruth, in the past we've had new commissioners introduce themselves. Did you want to do that now?
I don't see why not. Mary Ellen, since you were newly sworn in right before the meeting,
Yes.
just want to go ahead and introduce yourself. And
How much time do you have? Excuse me. I would say that I'm an artist, a plein air artist. I go out every Wednesday morning in the summertime and paint. And I'm a naturalist and a gardener and a hiker and love the outdoors. 12 years ago, my husband and I came out here looking for a place to live after we retired. We looked all over the state and settled here and found out this is one of the most pristine, beautiful little towns in the state of Arkansas. And so we were looking for a lake to live by and mountains, and we chose Holiday Island. And so since we moved here, I wanted to help maintain the mission statement of the parks, because I was very interested from hiking in the parks and looking at the gardens, that I wanted to help preserve, protect, and enhance the park assets. And so I felt like that was a good mission to follow. So I helped to plant native plants at the park, at the Lake Leatherwood. I helped to maintain several gardens in town, historic museum, the Eureka Springs Garden Project. I did some other gardens, but now I've just limited myself to 2. And so I'm willing to help with the parks in the Lake Leatherwood to help plant or do other volunteers that they'd like to have. Any questions?
all right.
Well, welcome.
Welcome, yes.
Well, thank
Glad
you.
you're here. And we have a quorum tonight, don't we? Yes, we do. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move.
I second.
Mark and Mary Ellen, any questions, comments? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Do I need to vote?
Yes, you do.
Yes, chair votes yes. The motion passes 4-0. Approval of the agenda. Public comments are next. I see Sharon out there and Steph. Any public comments? Chairperson's comments. I don't really have any comments other than beginning of the year 2023, some new interim director who has worked with parks for a long time, some new commissioners, another one that's not here tonight. I'm pretty excited about this year. I want to make it a good year for being positive, and I think we all feel the same way. This just no negativity. Let's be positive and keep on that track. Anyway, Director Steve?
I thought I'd just run down and discuss in brief what some of the main topics we discussed during the workshop, and just if there are any major updates to those items. So first of all, as an interim director, my focus really has just been on the safety, security, and sustainability of the park. So kind of keep us on track with some of the vision Scott had and where the commission wants the park to go, but just keep it an even keel for now, and work with the team out there so that we're ready to transition to a new person when they come on board. So organizational structure realignment, we discussed that a little bit during the workshop about some ideas about how we might look at the structure of parks as far as having a director and possibly 1 or 2 individuals underneath the director in a management capacity, and then the rest under. The staff is not really large, and the organization is very flat right now, though. So it's just the director and then everybody else. And the idea is to kind of look at that and say, are there ways maybe for the next director to step in and then have someone work the operational side while the director works a lot of the planning, the programming, the grant work, and things like that. So it's kind of a way to work and manage workflow. We discussed an emergency response plan. There's nothing built in that particular area except what we have in the operations manual. I've got 2 manuals that are in draft form that I'm going to take to final, and we'll use them now, and then we'll kind of develop them as we go. The operations manual basically is how we do business on just as a park, and how all the employees and how the staff works together. And in that, it has a piece on emergency planning. And that'll address like snow events, bad weather, things that we need to respond to, like EMT response, fire response, and police response. So that will hopefully go, I'm going to take that out of draft hopefully before the end of the month, and we'll use it. And next on the list was vehicle refresh plan. That's progressing. We've got a new maintenance vehicle, which I think helps a lot. And our maintainer can stay on site with all his equipment and not have to come back and forth to pick up gear to get a job done. I'm still focusing on that, looking at the ATVs, not the ATVs, but the UTVs. That's the reason I sent out that one sheet in the email. That was just to give you an idea of what I'm thinking. And the fact that we have 2 UTVs out of the park, both of which, one is broken. It's an old one we're trying to repair. The other one has got a CV joint that the boot is broken on it, and also probably is going to have that new that joint repaired, and it has to get in the shop. But of course, once we take it in the shop, we're down to 0. So the plan is to have 3 to 4 UTVs. One of them, I hope, will be used by the gardener in town, and one of them will be used out at the park by the folks working on the buildings, so that they can scoot around and get to those buildings instead of using golf carts, because they receive a lot of abuse. Golf carts really aren't designed for the kind of work we're using them for. So that's what that's all about. It kind of gives you the cost, and the reason I wanted to put it in front of you is that I went out and I looked at this vehicle just over the weekend, and it's something I think I'd like to move on quickly and get that one at least in place. So we have 2 vehicles refreshed out there, and then when the new person comes on board, they can say, okay, let's go on and talk about how we want to do that. And below that was kind of a concept diagram. Wasn't really a concept chart as much as it was showed you where the vehicles were going to be used. That gives you an idea of why I thought about using the UTVs and the vehicles that way. Next is facilities and infrastructure refresh plan. We've done a lot in this regard. We're working on the house or the cabins out there right now. I just don't have it with me, but Juanita sent me a detailed report on an inspection of all the cabins out there, where they are on painting and where they are on refreshing those. So she's right on to that, and they're getting those all squared away for the spring and summer visits. The visitor center is nearly completed. The doors in place, the side windows are in place, the floor is in place. The inside has got new sidewall or drywall, and I think the luminaries are up now, so we have the lamps up inside. I'll have to check with Vince on that. And the goal there is to maybe put 2 desks in there. One desk will be for Juanita to be the parks manager, and when folks come by, they can drop in and say hello, and they do. If you're out there working on the place, they come by and start asking questions, so it's really important that we have that presence. And then another desk I'm hoping to make available to our EMT folks. So when they come out there, they can park their vehicles, come inside, sit down, relax, maybe get out in the park a little bit, visit with the trails coordinator, be familiar with the area. But it also provides them a place to call home out there. The rest of the space can be used for visitor center and for classes. We have a chainsaw class that's coming up at the end of this month, and we're hoping to use that facility. So we'll do training in there, and then they'll go out and do their field training on the glade, which still has some work to be done on clearing the cedars. So they'll be working on projects that have already been approved as far as cedar removal, and anything else would be, logs that are already down. So we have a chance to use that as a classroom for that class and for future classes, and hopefully one day we can have workshops out there. I think that would be neat if you all are interested. Let's see. The dam, we've been talking a lot about the dam lately. I was talking to Simon in Public Works, and he has some ideas that might be a lower-cost solution. I talked to Kyle about the possibility of doing a little test section on the dam to see if there's a way to repair some of the rails and some of the pillars out there and just see how well that works. And then Kyle could take a look at it as well. Of course, anything we do, we'd also have to roll in with an engineer to say, okay, well, does it meet specifications? Will it truly work? There are other plans that have been put out there before, as you guys know. Some of them are quite expensive, up to $2 million in cost. We're trying to bring that down. So the idea would be to repair some of that concrete, see how it works, and if we can do that in a cost-effective manner, also look at the inside of both sides and put some stanchions with connecting meshing that would be, pleasing to the site, but also would prevent people from having, losing stuff over the side of the dam, and when they're walking with their pets and young ones, it creates a much safer crossing environment. So we're looking into all that. Harmon Park project is going well. I think Sue just saw the stairs out, not Harmon Park,
Hardin Springs.
Harding Springs. Yeah, so you got to see the stairs there. The Crescent Spring is going well. I went by there and talked to Stacy here recently. So all of those are running on schedule with no hiccups that I can tell. So the only other thing I had on here was the dam sluice valve, and we discussed that. I'm kind of sliding, and I'm going to recommend to the new director slide that off toward the end of the year, because part of that effort was to decide if it has something in front of it that is going to present a hazard when you open the valve, because you then need to close the valve. We do need to exercise the valve as part of a routine maintenance process each year, but we don't want to get the valve open and not be able to close it. And with the silt buildup inside the lake, that presents a problem. And some of the ways of checking that, I think one of the bids was, and that's the $16,000 that's in the budget, was for divers to check it. I'd also heard later on that some folks had come up with the possibility of using remote vehicles to go down there and check it. And then Sam came up and said, why don't we just drop a plumb line down and see how, when it hits bottom? And I said, yeah, that might work too, because then if I can look at the engineering diagrams, I can see where, if that sluice valve, the piping for it is horizontal, then we can get maybe a good mathematic estimate of where, that valve is, and if it's been covered with silt. And if it's been covered with silt, it's not a good idea to open it for safety and closing it. And that's what the dam was designed to do, was prevent that from going downstream and causing damage. So part of the idea is to wait a little bit so that our current watershed assessment grant includes a part of lake health assessment. And part of that is a bathymetry analysis of the lake and measurement. And so they were going to start that earlier this year. That's what I was hoping, because they need to have the leaves off the tree, because they set up points on either side, either bank, and I think they run their equipment. I don't know exactly how it works. I haven't asked that, but they need the trees to be bare of leaves so that they can work that. But the timing of the grant was such that it was started later, and they've got to focus more on what's called the QAPP, which is their measurement requirements that has to go in front of EPA. The EPA has to approve the ways that they're going to take their measurements and their science. So because that has priority right now, because we can't do much else until we have that sorted out, I kind of pushed the bathymetry piece off to the fall when we get leaf off. Mm-hmm. And so that'll be a little bit later. So that $16,000 I think should be left alone for now, and maybe use the other method, just do a drop line and see if we can figure it out that way, just to get an idea. But toward the end of the year, maybe look harder at that particular item. We used the Natural Resources Preservation Plan out on the lake in the test method just recently. Mm-hmm. It was a rather simple project. It was putting up a bridge across one of the, it wasn't really active. It's not necessarily a stream as much as it is, you get backwater from the lake, and in high water times or high flow, maybe heavy rain, you get some water feeding into it. But it's an area where we have a lot of roots exposed on a tree, and it's a slip hazard, a fall hazard for our hikers out there. And Sam came up with a plan to, use some of the trees that were harvested out of the glade, now that we're restoring the glade, use those trees and, in essence, recycle that back into finished cedar to build that bridge. And so we had Sue came out to take a look at that, and we had Chris out there to look at it, and we also exercised our checklist on the NRPP to ensure that we're looking at all the variables out there. Now, we can't get into very hard science. To do that, it would take quite a bit of time and almost a whole season analysis, and that may be required in some cases, in some instances. But in this particular case, the area was not complex, and it wasn't a really, it was easy to go through the checklist and do a good assessment using what we had. Now, that's not to say we can go that fast with other ones, and that's why that checklist is set up with 3 different levels. The first level is something that's just on, say, a minor trail modification. In this case, it's kind of the second level, which means you're going to put a project on the trail. That requires not only the project manager to sign off, but also the director. And then if you get into something very complex that's talking about potential damage to our ecosystem out there with a trade-off factor in there, well, that should probably come to the commission. The director would bring it in front of you so we could discuss it in more detail, bring in some botanists, some ecologists, and dig into more detail. So we don't want to rush into things, but we also want to maintain safety and a good, secure environment out there in the lake. So it's a balance of those things, and we got a good test of it, I think, this time on a fairly simple project. So we used the plan, and that was a good exercise. Marketing and public relations are going along really well. Juanita and Susan are running with those projects. The website we're hoping will be up before the end of the month. I don't have a firm date on that, but we have a contract out on that, and she's working to get that back up and get all the various functionalities that we need onto that. So in the interim, they're using Facebook and various other social media platforms to get the word out, and from what I understand, it's active, and we're getting feedback from folks, so they're doing really well with that. Let's see. The other were time permitting discussions in the workshop, so I don't know that I need to get into those. That's just a recap of those main things we did at the workshop, and it's basically what we're doing today, and the focus, again, is just trying to really take care of what we've got and get our facilities squared away and get our processes, our administrative processes squared away so that when the new director comes on board, he or she will have something to work with rather than have to scramble. So, any questions? Or?
I have a question. You mentioned about this new bridge that you want to put in.
It is in. It's a small bridge over.
Right.
Yeah.
My concern is that you'll use some machinery, some vehicles that might destroy the flora and the fauna. You'll be careful about that?
Yes, and what we have is called a Mini-X, and it's a really good machine for working in the parks. And at the tracks, it's a smaller with a backhoe type facility, and it has a small blade in the front if you need to push material around. But the nice thing about it is you can bring those tracks in, and you can bring them in to get so you're not damaged. You're staying on the trail when you get to where you're going. And they used it on the Stephen Foster Educational Glade, and it did widen out that trail a little bit, but not much. And in a way, it didn't bother us too much because we're trying to make that particular trail more accessible. So, but, as long as it's not damaging the edges of the trail too much, we can get that to grow back and we can groom that back in. But the whole idea when they use these things and how they used it on that glade was they were told, stick to the trail as much as possible. If you have to go back into the back of the glade where we have our the dolomite shelves, and some of those are rather fragile, well, we stopped and we thought about, okay, what's the best path to get back there without getting on those shelves? And we did that. We got back there. We got the materials out of there, and then we watched it to see how well it recovered. And that area is now fully recovered pretty much. I don't know that you can even see that they've been back there. So Sam was very cognizant of that when he went out there. We discussed it before he went out, and he said, yeah, I'm going to come in this way, and he has to use it because he's hauling some very large logs to get this set up. But he was aware of that, and he uses that tool quite well. I hope that addresses your question.
Is there a chance that I could come out and see that?
Sure, yeah. Anytime at all, just give a yell, and what we'll do is we'll get Sam out there, and they can take you out there to show you.
You saw
The
it?
bridge is
Yeah,
up.
so maybe, Ellen, if you go out at the Beecham Trail at the end of the campground. And then, you get in that kind of open area, we just kind of cross by the old wooden bridge. And then just go a little bit further, then you'll see the new bridge. Still in that same kind of, open area.
Okay.
Happy to have you out there anytime to
Okay.
discuss many of the projects out there. We'll take you out and to the dam, take a look at that particular bridge. I think he's got the approaches, he's working on it. He had it up so you could step up, but he still had to build out the approaches, and I think he's got that done now,
Okay.
or close to having that done. So, no.
Any other questions? I have a question about the website. I just want to remind me what the name of the company is that's doing the website. I'm sorry, you don't remember either?
Something with Bullet, Straight Bullet, or...
Yeah.
It's, yeah. It's a good web, we've looked at this before we brought them on board. And I went out and looked at different vendors by looking at their websites, and the websites around Eureka Springs and vendors that are local, and looked at how they had constructed the websites, the quality of the websites, the navigation of the websites. And this was something, that I enjoy doing because I'd studied it for a little while, not too long ago. But what I really enjoyed about this particular vendor is the kind of a retro look that he embedded in a lot of the websites. And we discussed that and how we have kind of, when you go into Lake Leatherwood, the lettering is kind of, what do you call it? Not Gothic, but Irish type lettering, the Lake Leatherwood. And so I'm looking forward to see his first prototype. And he will present a prototype, so we don't have to go final. And that'll be something that can come in front of the commission so you can look at it and say, whether it meets the needs of the commission before we go final on that.
I did look at their other sites. He did Wanderoo and some other things
Yeah, they
too,
did.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and some of them are very,
I liked it.
somewhat modern, and other ones, I think, are probably, 70s type, and even 50s maybe, in their look.
Yeah,
And
I liked their work.
I thought it was very typical of Eureka Springs, kind of an eclectic build, so,
Yeah, it'd be good to have our website.
yeah, it will, yeah.
Modernized. Okay.
It's been kind of dramatic, trying to get that squared away again, so.
Anything else for our interim director? Committee reports. Do we have any committee reports tonight?
No. Of course, it's not.
Old business, none. Let's go to new business. The first item would be election of officers. Carissa is not here, Lori's not here.
And Rod is not here. so
And
we
Rod
have
is not
3
here.
people out.
Do y'all want to put it off, or do you want?
Yes.
I think we should, it'd be appropriate.
I think we should put it off.
Okay.
But I don't think we should put it off to the 3rd Tuesday of February. I think we're going to have to call a special meeting. And we're not down to that, but I'm thinking of the executive director hiring thing too. Lori was keyed on the
I know.
team, and I just feel like everybody should be here.
I think so too for that. And I wanted Carissa's input also, even though she wasn't on that.
Yeah,
But she,
absolutely.
I feel like it's
Absolutely. So
important to add that too.
I'd love us to do it sooner than later.
Yeah.
But I think Lori said the 24th is when she gets back in
Yes,
town,
yeah.
so it'd have to be after the 24th.
Which is I think next Monday, so.
Yeah. So I feel like as soon as we can after that, we need to plan another meeting.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we've got 2 items and only one can be in a special meeting, right? Or can
You can have multiple special meetings.
okay.
You just have to open the meeting, do your thing, close it, open it. You can have multiple, but they have to be
Executive-
actual
executive sessions.
beginning and beginning end.
Okay.
And number 2 on new business, check signing kind of goes along with the election of officers, really.
Right, yes.
And I did talk to Andrea at the bank at Cornerstone just to clear up, because the process always seems a little funny to me.
It is.
And she said she does need a copy of the minutes where we approve who can sign, who can't. The minutes don't have to be approved by the next meeting approved. They just have to be a copy from that night. So I don't know how when we do that, we can bring her a copy and she'll get that sorted.
Yeah, I think in the past we've done that at a special meeting or done it at the workshop as a special meeting.
And I'm going to jump ahead just for a second to the executive sessions. The executive session to hire the director. We want to put that off, or do we want to go into executive session at all?
I would like to put that off, that particular one. Now, there's another one for staff position, but the number
That's different.
4, as much as I really want us to do this and do it quickly, I just think we should wait. The appropriate thing to do would be wait until everybody's here.
I think so, too.
Yeah, I've been really frustrated it's taken so long.
Yeah.
It seems like such a long time ago since I interviewed people.
Right, I know.
But I actually do agree with Mark. I think other people should have an input.
Yeah, and Lori's out of town and Carissa's sick, so they should both be available soon, we hope. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Rod will be back.
Rod will be back at the end of this week, so he'll be back next week, and Lori gets back, I think, Monday. I don't know, might check with her see when she's available for a meeting, but I feel like we definitely need to do it as quickly as possible.
Okay.
But
Then we'll still have our executive session about that staff position employment tonight.
okay.
Steve's got some input for that. But, so 1 and 2, we're going to have to put off to another meeting,
And 4.
and 4. We can discuss Independence Day programming and talk about fireworks. Let's dive into that.
Who doesn't like talking about fireworks?
I love fireworks. I've been trying to ask around town and just kind of get that little feel for, I wish I had a table at Hearts I could just sit at and catch people when they walk by.
Yeah, get the-
It'd be a perfect spot to get, or in the health food store, and see who feels like, but I think most of the input that I got was the same as I always get about fireworks. Yes, we'd love them, yes, we'd love them, yes, we'd
We
love
need to
them.
have-
Oh, is there going to be trash? We have to worry about the trash. Oh, is there going to be this? There's the same concerns. So I don't think anything's changed other than overall, definitely, the majority of people want something. Fireworks, the mayor's for it, the city's for it, public seems to be for it.
Yeah, and I think Steve's going to update us, but he had a meeting today on it, right?
He did. So should we just let Steve go ahead and tell us what he knows first?
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yes, we had a meeting after the department heads meeting today and discussed the fireworks. The main outcome as far as funding goes was that the total contract price is $21,000. CAPC is willing to put in $7,500, the city $7,500, and in front of you today is $7,500. I had mentioned at the meeting, $7,000 per, because that adds up to 21. But some of the members brought up a good point. They said it's better to have a little over that, so that if you have additional cost associated with the fireworks display, that it's already committed, as far as folks' contributions. So that really is the monetary piece, and then there's the planning piece, which is, right now, again, Juanita and Susan are working very hard on bringing together some ideas and plans, as is CAPC. So there's a lot of ideas out there. I guess at the end of the meeting, the outcome was Parks and Recreation to hold the Independence Day fireworks on the 2nd, which is a Sunday, and we'll have entertainment there. And working with CAPC, they have music in the park, and they're willing to take the money for music in the park and contribute that to that particular event. So that will be nice, and that we have some funding to assist with bringing musicians and artists, and also the idea of bringing artists was there. So it'll be music, food, and artists, so maybe put some booths up there at the head, Beecham trailhead, the trailhead. Maybe set something up in that area. I haven't really thought through the placement piece quite deeply, but basically set up something so that some of the local artists can present their wares during that period. So that would be the July 2nd celebration. Now, the discussion we had too was to try to carry this across to July 4th, so we have kind of a continuity there, so it's all for the 4th.
So let me just correct you. I think you just said July 2nd, but the contract you gave us the July 3rd for the fireworks. What
no,
date has that been proposed?
No, it's for 2nd. It's for the 2nd.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it says the 2nd.
Oh, okay.
But my question really on that, while we're on the date, is why not do it July 4th? Why the 2nd?
Availability, quite frankly. You have to get way, way ahead of these things, and
So this is to tell you that he can do it.
that's correct.
They
yes.
can do it.
And then
Second.
the mayor was happy with the second. He liked that. And there's also, I guess, the scheduling piece where, and I'm not familiar with, who's around in town and how things flow in town. But the whole idea is to kind of have a 3-day event. So, and one of the ideas that was brought forward by Michael during the meeting was looking at it and saying, okay, well, why don't we do that out in the park on the 2nd and maybe bring the rest down into Basin Park and start having music and things in Basin Park. Nothing's fully decided, because what we said, well, let's build a team of 3 folks, and 2 from Parks, 1 from CAPC, let them sit around, come up with some ideas and plans, and then we'll go from there. So we've got the funding, I think, for the fireworks kind of squared away, but how we want to do Monday and Tuesday is still something to be discussed. At first, we thought it was my thinking was something in the city on Monday and then something back out in the parks on Tuesday. But quite frankly, I kind of like the idea of bringing it back into the city, because the 4th is the birthday of Eureka Springs.
Yeah.
So it seems appropriate to have something in Eureka Springs
It does,
proper.
and it's also, I think one day you can manage maybe getting some of the trolleys to go out there, or shuttles, or somehow to get people out there with, solve some of the parking issue, but I don't think you could do that for 3 days,
Yeah, that's a very good
I
point,
think
yeah.
one day you might be able to swing that.
Yeah.
I don't think the 3
So,
days.
so I'm actually not, I'm going to go back to the finances, though, because this wasn't, my understanding is this wasn't in the budget we just approved.
That's true.
So how is this going to get funded?
It was in the footnote, and it was down at the bottom of the
It was
footnote.
discussed, but there was no vote taken, and as far as I'm, the event budget is for $1,000, not for any
That's
more
true.
than...
And that's why tonight we're going to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's what
Okay.
tonight's.
And then have you any assessment of what other costs would be involved, particularly involving staff time in putting this on? But also, if we have music there, the stages, there's all kinds of different costs that will be involved that are not the fireworks.
That's true. And that's something the team has to come out and say, okay, here's the plan, here are these elements. And then what you would end up doing is you'd probably say, okay, based upon what can be funded and who wants to fund it, we can expand it out to this point, but not beyond that, because our budgets can't sustain that. So I would see them, in some of these instances, it's like the music. If CAPC is going to come and say, well, we'll use our music in the park funding for that, well, then that's offset. When it comes to staffing, it depends on how we want to work our work week. If we say, okay, on Friday, we'll have Friday off, and we're going to come and work on Sunday, and work the shift work a little different for that week, so that we can sort it out that way. And we have some folks that right now are part-time that probably would enjoy working those extra hours and still be within their part-time hour limitations. So there are ways, I think, of managing the staffing. And then we'll also have to remember that other staffing would be coming from the city, because we'll have folks from the transportation side of the house. A requirement would be to have a police presence. The fire department has already raised their hand and say, hey, guys, when you get ready, start talking to us, obviously, because they're going to have to do inspections and make sure it's safe. So we're going to have a lot of folks, I think, on the public safety side there, which is good. When it comes to the management of people and things like that, we have to kind of let the team come up with an idea there, and then we start talking about, okay, what extra do we need, and can we do that?
Right, because, you need some kind of parking control. There's a requirement that we clean up all the trash the next morning after the fireworks.
Correct, yeah.
But just my experience of putting on these events, it takes way, way more time than you ever think. The thought of having someone be off on the crew be off on a Friday when you've got an event on Sunday doesn't sound realistic to me. There's always something, moving stuff around, mowing. It just always seems like a ton of stuff that needs to get done to these events. It's never as simple as you think, even if it's a fairly simple event. And this sounds like it's getting more and more complicated.
It is, and I understand totally what you're saying. When I was in college a long time ago, I had to put together a nationwide event in St. Louis, and bringing all those people together, especially college students, was a logistic nightmare at times. And it does involve a lot of people and a lot of different elements. But at this stage of the game, I think that the key thing to me is that we need this funded, because if we don't early on fund this, then you're not going to have any fireworks at all. But the other program pieces, I think, will have to be scaled. And what you do is you start out with your plan, and you look at your plan, and you say, okay, what are we trying to achieve? What resources do we have to achieve that? And who can we have come in to help us? If it's not our staff, where else do we go? How do we bring that together? So those things are important, but they have to be developed as you come up with your ideas.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, you're asking us for a certain amount, I'm sure we're going to ask for a certain amount now, but if that is committing to, having to have porta potties, having to have extra staff overtime, we're voting for more than the amount that you're asking for, but we don't know what that amount is.
That's true, yeah, and that's the thing, is that this has to be developed as we go along. Really, this piece is due to the fact that you have a time limitation on it. Ideally,
Right.
what we would do is we say, yes, let's wait until end of January, maybe February, where we build out this entire plan, and then we have a cost associated with that. But right now, the reason this is on the table is due to the time factor for the vendor.
Right. But, so what is the plan? Where will the fireworks be? Where will the people be? I know you don't have it, refined, but is there a basic idea of where these things will
Basic idea would be, and again, all these things have to be worked out a bit when we talk to the vendor as well. There was talk about putting fireworks out on a barge, and I'm not really keen on that idea because of the added cost of the barge, and then I can't imagine that. But
Yeah, and trash pickup too.
Oh, yes, yeah. But, so the idea would be to use Mulladay Hollow, and you can put the music down by the group camping site because we have a lot of electrical outlets down there already with lighting and setup. And then CAPC's checking into their stage, that they have a portable stage. They're going to see if it can be used in the field or it has to be indoors only. So we're looking at those elements too, which is good for us in a way because we wanted to go and put something into Mulladay Hollow that would be used for performances. So it'll give us a chance to
Yeah.
kind of look
When you say
that up.
Mulladay Hollow, you're talking about part of the campground, the end of Mulladay Holiday. You're not talking about being up into the canyon. Is that correct?
Into the what?
You're not talking about being up into Mulladay. You're just talking about being at the bottom end where the camping is.
The band, if you know where the group campsite is, toward the back,
right.
where we had the
Yeah.
celebrations
Yeah,
before.
I mean, I think of Mulladay
Yeah.
Hollow as being the
Yeah.
trail that's the other side of the bridge, and so I just make sure that's not what you're talking about.
Oh, no, this is, you have the meadow, you have Electric
Right.
Alley, and you have Mulladay Hollow. This is the Mulladay Hollow that feeds back up to the west. And toward the back of that, we've got a group campsite with a lot of electrical outlets there already and lighting. So that looks to be a good place to say, put the band down there, and then they can come in by our shop in the back. So they can come down the hill there, bring all their stuff in through the back gate. Our guests can come in for the front, and we can set something up there in the front. And they can also watch the band and things like that. We can have the food wagons up at the top of the hill, maybe near the bathhouse, because I don't know that we want them driving down the hill. It's a pretty steep hill there. So put that up there, and folks can go from there on down to Mulladay Hollow, and then the launch site for the fireworks over toward the end of Electric Alley, where we have that the swim area, which is not used right now because of invasive plants and messing up the water, and also our geese problem.
Goose poop.
So use that area, and I have to get with the vendor to see how much space he needs. So if he can use that to set up his launch, that's nice, because then our police can cordon that area off so that people can't approach it from the bait house, and then they won't be able to approach it from the Mulladay Hollow end, because it's very easy to choke those points and put barriers up there and keep the kids away and stuff like that. So that's just a first idea. And then you also have the meadow, so the guests can come and sit on the meadow, and then they can see the fireworks from the meadow.
Yeah. So what would you do with the campground? I mean, is that going to be open, or is that going to be closed for the weekend while this is going on?
I would imagine for that particular, we can block out those days and close them. We haven't even gotten to that stage quite yet.
Yeah. I mean, some people may want to camp while that's going on, but if they didn't know about this event and booked and thought they were going to, invite their friends over and have a regular campsite, I would be pretty pissed to find out that was going on.
But being Independence Day weekend, I think people would check ahead of time. They wouldn't just book a camp, I would think.
Well, some of them may be booking early in advance, so...
I'll get Juanita to check into that and see how many
Yeah.
campers we might have already
And you
booked.
think at this point, in this stage,
Right.
we have to decide, and we as a commission support this whole idea of funding and doing this project, because that's key. If we decide to do that, then we have to vote for some form of budget, because we didn't do that intentionally
Right.
in the beginning.
Right.
And if we do that, then, I mean, there's a lot of details that have to be worked out, obviously, and it is between the city and CAPC and us, you know, right? Everybody's working together to do this, because there's going to be trolley stuff and shuttles, there's going to be CAPC and the bands and music, and there's lots of details, I get all that. But I think we have to decide funding right now, how much we really need to realistically, that comes out of our budget, need to plan on. Because if we get, I don't want this to get crazy, you know, it'd
Right.
be $50,000 when we were planning on 20.
I think we should focus tonight on the amount that was asked for.
Yeah, for this.
And all these other details that Sue was asking about, those details we won't be known until we say, yes, we want to do it, and then this guy
Exactly.
says yes, he comes out and
Yeah.
picks the site. And it's been done so many years in the past. There's lots of people in town, the fire department included, they've done lots of controlling parking, things like that. There's lots of organizations that have helped with it in the past, so it won't be, you know, reinventing the wheel here. There'll be lots of people and organizations ready to jump in and
Yeah, I think there's a lot of folks that are very eager to do this, and probably will bring resources to the
I'd
table.
also like to say, Steve, that I think it might be a good idea to just bring this to the team that's, I know they're going to start working on it, is try to create a volunteer group that can do that. I know there's enough people in town who were really upset about not having anything last year. There's a lot of talk around that, and I mean, even for the celebration, you know, the city celebration. So I think we could get a volunteer group and at least help with some of the resources required for some of
Yeah.
that.
That
Yeah.
website might be very helpful in that regard, too, when we
Yeah,
set that up.
that's a good idea. Reach
So,
out on the
yeah.
website.
Now, when you're talking
Juanita,
about the
yeah.
amount, not to get off track, or off subject, I'm sorry, we would be signing the contract, so we would have to fund this and be reimbursed by CAPC and the city.
So, Steve, I mean, we had just passed a budget that was close to balanced, and we had the thought that, you know, if revenues get ahead of what we expect, we could fund some more things.
Yes.
Where do you see the funding from this? Are we funding this and just hoping we get more revenues? I mean, we're talking about closing the campground for 4th of July weekend.
Yep.
So we have a loss there.
I see
And-
the sluice
and
valve
I just
work.
know these little things that just come up that just eat
They
away.
do, yeah. And the sluice valve work being put off and possibly not even accomplished this year due to the fact that that's $16,000 right there from the sluice valve work. Other issues that I wasn't necessarily going to get in today because I probably want to discuss at a workshop is the shuttle and the fact that we've got 2 shuttles that, quite frankly, I think we need to be out of that business. I think it could be handled by the commercial side of the house much more efficiently, and then what we would have is a revenue stream from that, but we wouldn't have the overhead of staffing. We wouldn't have, not that that's, I'm not against having staffing, but I'm saying additional requirements for staffing. And then the maintenance and the costs associated with those vehicles. And those vehicles, when we possibly auction, we can get some funding from that as well as we pull that back and then we focus on our core. I think the most important thing for us to be doing as a park is focusing on our core. And that has to do with our recreation and our preservation side of the house. We need to start balancing those, and then we need to start really focusing on maintaining what we've got, because that's the reason we're behind the power curve right
Yeah.
now, is because we haven't done that in the
Yeah.
past.
And I have a question if this event is really our core focus.
This event is because it draws people to the park. The park is part of the city. It's a reflection of the city. The park is the citizens of the city. It is theirs. And it's a reflection of them and their values and how they feel about, you know, recreation, preservation, nature, and their country. And what better place to have it is in a park.
But I don't think they get to appreciate nature. It's going to be a lot of it's going to be after dark. It's going to be lots of people,
Yep.
loud bangs. I mean, I'm actually really concerned about wildlife and the effects of having loud bangs going off right in the middle of the park.
Recreation to coexist with nature in a large park, there's always that balance, and
Right.
people won't be there to appreciate nature that night. They'll be there for the fireworks and to be in the park and be together and be outside together.
Right, yes.
They won't be out there to listen to the birds quietly. I mean,
Right,
we know that.
exactly,
We know,
yes.
No, they won't. That's fine. That's not what everyone does in the park. That's the whole point of having
Right.
a park that's for everyone.
Yeah.
And recreation.
I've enjoyed the fireworks in Eureka Springs. I'm not against having fireworks. I just have so many questions about this when it's such an incomplete plan we're committing to. There's so many issues that are involved that haven't been thought through. And one of my major, particularly the financial one, we don't know what we're getting into. We don't have the money like set aside for it. But one of the other big concerns for this year of doing this is we have a new director coming on board soon. And we're putting this other whole thing, other whole plate of responsibilities on whoever it is going to have a lot to do of getting up to speed, getting, up to, and then we put this other whole thing of by July, beginning of July, they have to organize this event. And I
They're
just
gonna have
really question if that is, if you have a new director comes next year and says, yes, I want to do this event, then I'd be much more willing to go along with that than just say do it when it just seems like not, we're at the point of having to sign the contract, but we don't have any idea of what this really looks
Well, once
like, or
again,
even an estimate of
you
what the
can
cost
expand
might be.
and contract something like this at will. So you don't have to have a massive event. You can have a small event. Your new director steps up to the plate based upon where the park is going, no matter what. You don't back off on your goals.
Right.
You don't back
Right.
off on your
To wait.
needs.
I'm not
based
talking about
upon-
backing. I don't want to
Let me
back off.
finish.
I don't want to back off on anything we've committed to, but do we want to add more to their plate? Is my
It's
question.
not adding more to their plate. This is their current job.
And it's Independence Day where we are expected as a park to do something. And
Well,
that was a problem
and the whole party-
we haven't for the last few years. We haven't been asked to for the last few years.
because
whole
of
part of your-
COVID and
No, because the things were at Marble Flats.
The goal is to increase public participation in the park. So let me add a few things here then. Because we have the 4th of July celebration, which I think is a wonderful thing for the park because it gets out away from folks' pets. And it gives them a venue where it's a bit safer.
So we take
and-
it to the wildlife, but okay.
Yes, but you do this nationwide. Where do you want to draw that line? So the bottom line is you take these things out to the park, and then you have two other events that bracket this, one in front and one in behind. Now, they're not going to be as large, and we're looking at things like solstice events or something out there that brings the community closer to the park and to nature and to the things out there. So it's much more, it's getting them engaged with nature. Now, you cannot engage with nature without sometimes being disruptive. But what you can do is minimize that disruption, but then you want to get people out to learn. The purpose of a park, in my mind, is to get the public out to learn about conservation, to learn about preservation, to learn about safe and good recreation, so that they can apply those skills when they get out in at WMAs, when they hear about later on a project that needs to be completed and they're looking for funding. Well, they'll say, okay, I understand it. I understand why you're doing glade restoration. I understand why you're restricting the expansion of this particular project because you want to protect, say, a restricted, not a restricted, but a species, a plant or animal. So your park is an educational tool. It's a recreational tool. It's a preservation tool. It is not a preserve, in my mind. That's just me. But it doesn't mean we can't teach those skills. So Juanita, for example, is an educator. She is excited about the opportunity to bring children to the park, to get them to learn about things like fishing. I just approved her taking some classes to go learn about fishing and about the species and all these other things associated with fish. They're in the lake out there. She's excited about that, but she's probably highly motivated to get some kids out there to say, okay, this is a good place to fish, and then talk more about it, not just to fish, but to learn about the fish and the various species that might be in the lake. So, and we also have, coming up soon, the folks from Beaver Watershed Alliance are having they're getting engaged in glade, learning about the glades and teaching people about glades. One of their first events is going to be at the Stephen Foster Educational Glade. So they're going to bring folks out to do walkthroughs through that glade and discuss that glade. And we hopefully, when we have that office open up, we might have some facilities there for folks to come in and see, say, some pictures and some history of glade. So the park is multi-use, and not the least of those uses is the preservation of species. So no, we don't look at the 4th of July when we want to go out there and distress the animals. We look at this as a patriotic event, a chance for people to get together, to share their values, to share them, the time together, but to also learn that they've got a park there. And even if it's dark, they're still in the park. And that's important, I think. And you carry that forward. That's the whole purpose, in my mind, of a park. It's not a wildlife area, but we do protect, as best we can, our plants and our wildlife. So I don't see it as being as hazardous, maybe, as you might think, because we do this in Eureka Springs, and sound carries. And where does that sound become a significant problem? The biggest thing probably is cleanup, and we will be focused strongly on cleanup. So when you have the debris, and they speak to this in that particular contract, that the day after,
Yes.
you need to have a cleanup team, and we will do that, because that's important.
I would like to add about what a park is. I also believe that in Eureka Springs and in multiple places, the park it's part of our tourism industry. It's not just a park and recreation. It's part of our tourism industry here. The park is part of what drives tourists to the area. And locals use it too. I'm not saying locals do, but parks are also what makes Eureka what it is, which does attract tourists. Even if they never go to the park, they come to Eureka because we are this, like moved here because it's beautiful, it's pristine. We care about our parks, we care about our wildlife, all these things. We have an obligation, I think, also to recognize the park is part of the economic structure of this town. And when an event like 4th of July or Independence Day happens, we need to participate. I think that's our obligation. That's just my opinion, but I think it's how people would feel too about it. When I talk to shopkeepers and things, they expect the city, whether it's the park or the CAPC or somebody, to support events on holidays especially, that help them bring tourists in too. So
Ruth, historically, and I know that the last year that I was here before I moved away and came back, they think it was 2019, they did it at Marble Flats, right? Prior to that, because anything after that was really COVID, so it's like
Right.
nothing counts in those years. But prior to that, was it always a parks event? And for
Always.
years and going back, it's been a parks
always. And the
event.
fire department always helped with volunteers too. I might remind them.
Yeah,
They want to be down there. Their volunteer people are always down there helping, so.
Okay, that's good. And then the other question I have for that is, in line with what Sue was saying, we knew that when we approved this budget, that there would be requests that are above this budget, and that we were going to handle them one-off basis. But I want to be clear that as we do it for this, that reduces the amount we have for other things. So it's not like we're not going to get everything, right? So it's sort of a trade-off for which one's more important or most important, because we can't do it all. I support this. I'm not anti this at all. I just want to make sure that we're pretty clear that there's a lot of other things that we were kind of reserving for, and if we spend this money for this, we might not have it for that. So
Yep.
just a point.
I agree with you. Yeah. And the thing is, we shouldn't ignore revenue generation during these events.
Right.
Right.
So there are opportunities there when you have vendors to say, okay, this is the, a price for entry and these kinds of things, so that we can offset some of these costs. And I think Juanita is very much into marketing additional things from the bait shop and from possibly the office. So the revenue side is not just a spend. There's also an offsetting that we're going to try to do as well. But once again, we need to get started. We need to get our feet wet. We need to start thinking that way, getting away, in my mind, from, say, the shuttle business, and say, what are we doing to engage the citizenry and our visitors at the park, and then what can we do to generate the revenue so that we can maintain the park and give them more as far as quality facilities. And that's, I think, an opportunity. But we have to learn how to do it. And we haven't done events like this, I don't think,
In a long
very
time.
frequently. But we need to start now and come up with how we want to do it. A long time ago, Scott said he wanted a marketing plan for the park. And we're now going to start working on a marketing plan, and Juanita's ready to do that. So that will be an element that I think should be discussed by the team, and I think by the commission. I think Sue, engaging with the folks and saying, what elements are there to generate revenue, and what elements are there to ensure that we're not overextending. That's excellent ideas, but I just think we're just not there yet. But it's January.
Yeah. I'm just really concerned of there's so little, we don't even know how many days this is going to be. I am just really concerned that what we're what we're getting ourselves into when we really have no idea what is even thought of. And I say, I think this, it may not even be the tangible expenses, but just the thought of you would even think that you could have people take a days off during the week before an event like this. I just know it just, at least my experience, has never worked like that.
It's
just
kind
always,
of a risk management aspect where you look at it and say, okay, is it all on parks? And it isn't all on parks. It's the city and CAPC, the vendors downtown, it's the commercial enterprises. It's a team effort. It's not just a parks effort. We are one part of this, and we're providing the venue. But I think that also gives us the opportunity to say that, okay, we're providing the venue, we're providing some investment, but this is a community event where the city and other organizations and even volunteers and come together and say, this is something we want to do. As far as management of personnel and things, that's a managerial issue. That's what the directors do. And they have to balance that out. And that's a challenge, but that's what directors do. When it comes to the money side, commission does.
Right.
But I don't see a problem in executing a plan, a good plan by the parks, but it's going to be a team effort. It is not just parks.
yeah.
Ours
I'd
are-
like to make the
we
comment.
have events in parks, but they are put on, we have a contractor and a vendor that puts those on. We provide the venue, but we are not responsible for, with bicycle events or what have you. We're not responsible for finding the people to do it. We have certain obligations, to things set up, but we're not taking on that whole responsibility.
But we are going to take on more
But
events
this
at the
is
park.
good.
That's part of the whole
we are-
marketing plan, the
yeah.
solstice plans. We are going to start taking on more events.
Yeah, and if other partners don't come, they don't come forward, it all falls on parks.
You also have an issue where you have 1,600 acres of parkland, and add that the city land, and you've got a population of, what, 2,200? You're trying to do a lot with a little. You've got
Yeah.
a staff of 10 to manage this,
Right.
and that's 9 if you don't want to include the director.
Right.
That's a big lift, a heavy lift. But the only way to do this is you've got to leverage technology, and you've got to leverage the skills of each other in the city. Parks doesn't do it alone. The city doesn't really manage all these, the springs and all the rest by themselves. They lean on parks. So it's not unusual, I think, for us to lean on city resources. So you have to, like I say, it's a risk management thing. You look at it and say, okay, who's involved, who's engaged, who's energetic and wants to do this, and that meeting with the department heads indicated to me that you have a lot of people who want this to work and are willing to put their time, energy, and funds on the table to make this happen. And it's also an opportunity for parks to start branching out and getting into things that truly are integral to us, which means events at the park that generate revenue, that get people engaged in their park, which is our job. Our job is not to be static and put a park out and expect people to come. Our job is to engage people, bring young people in, teach them about parks, teach them about preservation, teach them about safe recreation down those hills. That's our job.
Yeah,
So
but that's not what we're talking about with this event.
Well, yeah, I think you're talking about being able to handle the event and whether or not you have the monetary resources to do it.
Yeah,
And
but-
you have to reach out as a commission and start this and do these things to realize what you can and cannot do. You cannot sit back and say, I'm just not going to take that risk. Because if you don't take the risk, you're never going to know what you can do as a park. So, yeah, you take it out and you take it in measured steps to see what you can accomplish. Now, don't overextend. I agree with that. But you have to start, and there is some risk there. And that is worth it, because the risk is worth it because you're bringing people to the park. You're bringing young people to the park. You're bringing musicians to the park. You're bringing the citizenry to the park and our visitors to the park. That's why, that's why they give us the money in the first place. It's not my money. It's not our money. It's their money. So we should be using that to their benefit in preservation, recreation, and entertainment in this case, because the entertainment makes them aware and engaged with their park. And they're intangibles that maybe we're not going to see quite yet, but I think the more you do this, if you have like a solstice, the 4th of July, and a winter solstice, whatever, and
events.
everybody gets more engaged with the park, they understand it, they're going to be willing to step up. We're going to start seeing more volunteers post-COVID. We're going to start seeing folks that have a strong interest in preservation get out on the park and work the trails. And you're going to have recreational folks, I hope, that get together with the preservation guys, and then we start building things out there that are geared for both. But you can't do it unless you take some risk. I guess that's my perspective. But again, I am the interim director,
Yeah.
but I do not think you should look at that and say, well, we should make it easy on the next person, because then you need to evaluate how you're picking your person. You need to pick someone who can pick up that ball and run with it. And I don't plan on not briefing them
Yeah,
or not training them on all
Yeah,
these aspects
but
before they pick
I
up.
think it's just such a complex job with so many aspects already. It's not that I don't think they should be able to do this, but do we want to put it on the plate right as they're starting?
I think you're attaching too much complexity to this event. I mean, there's so many things out there that are much more complex than
It's
putting off a
actually-
4th of July
It's
celebration.
easy to pull it off, really, once you
You
get
know?
going. You get a lot of people helping out. I've never seen it difficult.
Right.
Mary Ellen's
I-
been trying to make a comment.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary Ellen.
I'm on this side of the table, but I hear what you're saying, and I would have those same concerns, but then I also hear what he's saying, what Steve is saying, and it's like, I'm willing to take a risk to see if they can do this without much damage to the park or whatever. And if there is too much damage, if there's too much injury to the plants and the floor and the lawn, it's like, let's don't do it next time. But I'm willing to take that risk with Steve and the park and to see what will happen. My other concern is that, Steve, you said that you will not be spending that $16,000. You're going to put that off for the,
I don't know that it will be expended this year because of the fact that if it's silted, we can't open it up.
Right.
Right.
It defeats the purpose of the
but
dam.
that's the possibility where the 7,000 could come from?
I think some of that can come from that. I think that I don't think you're going to expend that money. And I think that if you're also not spending on the vans, you could have some money back there. But I'd have to balance that off, and Nikki did some good math for me on looking at the expenses for that particular vehicle, you know, as far as how much money we get in revenue, then how much we spend in gas and employment and the rest. So that might be a wash on the funds, but the money you get back from, say, auctioning the vehicles or selling the vehicles, that money can come back in and then be used.
So you're very
the budget.
positive that there would be funds?
There would be,
There-
I
there-
think we could offset this.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, easily.
I think,
Yes.
as far as the fund go, Mary Ellen, it's the very beginning of the year. This budget just took place. I think it's too early to mark off something else and move it that we don't know
True.
or will.
Yeah.
So we have to assume that this is being paid for out of what's in reserve
That would make more sense.
and address that through the year as we get into revenue streams and expenses, and we'll figure out in those places. But I think we have to assume that whatever money we approve right now is coming not out of another budget line item,
Yep.
but out of the
Reserves.
reserves.
But, and also that term reserves kind of throws me a little bit.
I know.
Yeah,
because
and it's
an
basically
operating
just money
fund.
we have in reserve.
Well,
But it's
it-
not
it-
reserved for any specific thing.
Yeah,
We can spend
it's
it
your
however
operating
we want.
funds that you dip into because we have to do it all the time. We move money from there
Right.
to execute
It's
the budget.
basically our
Yeah.
savings. This is separate from that even, though. This is our savings account, you know. We do move money around based on, from revenue, different accounts, but this is basically our savings account. And we don't want to deplete that, obviously. But we knew when we approved this budget that there would be some expenses but we wanted to have a little more control over how that was done. I just don't want to go in and start saying, okay, we just now approved this budget the way it is. And let's start saying, well, we're going to take this from this, a little bit from that. We don't think we'll spend this. It's too early in the year to
That's
know
true.
what
Yeah.
is going to hit us through the year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
no,
we've just had a executive director that has advocated for all these items and said they're all essential. And he's nowhere been cutting, and these are the ones he said he wants to, really stick with. So,
Well, the working
so
reserve is a good place to go.
we don't want to get
financially.
moved back and forth too much over those.
And it is our job to say yes or no to the money tonight. And then it's the director and the
Make it
department's job to make it happen.
Yeah.
All of our questions about staffing and all these details, that's what we demand of our directors, what we demand of that department. That's what they will do. They'll make a plan and they'll do it.
Yeah, to
That's-
me,
that's-
it goes
that's-
back to what I said earlier. Our question right now is, do we want to do this? And if we do, how much do we want to fund it for?
Right,
period.
that's our only question tonight.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know
All these
if I
other
vote
things
aga-
are
I mean,
questions, but they're
I
not.
suspect if I vote against this, I'm going to be very unpopular with a lot of people. But it's just such a vague plan. We're saying go ahead with this, but we don't even know what it is. We don't know how many days. We don't know, no idea what expenses are
Well,
involved.
this particular item.
Is
this
just for the
particular
fireworks.
item, Just this, we were just talking about this, is solely for the fireworks.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Correct. And you
Okay.
would have that opportunity to look at the rest as it
Yeah.
evolves.
Yeah, that's all
Yeah.
separate
And say,
too.
do I
This is all
want to
just the
expend
fireworks
more?
contract.
Pardon?
So basically, we're
This is
saying,
just the
yes,
fireworks
we'll
contract.
pay for the fireworks.
So can we vote for this with just the understanding we're just voting for fireworks? We're
It
not
is just
voting
the
for
fireworks
anything
contract.
else? No music festivals, anything that can be discussed later? When we have more of a plan?
We don't have to
have-
agree to that. That is true in essence already, because all we're voting on tonight is the money for this contract.
Okay.
All those
Yeah, I
other
just
things
don't
are
wanna-
plans that he
I
will,
just want to make sure we don't get out of head. Oh, the CAPC's paying for this, so we'll let the CAP put up their stage, but we provide all the labor for
that would be dealt with.
parking.
It's not on
We
our,
don't want anything
that's
like
not on
that.
our agenda tonight to talk about that kind of thing.
Okay.
And that's, I mean,
And
we can
Steve,
talk.
I'm going to just
Not
reiterate
voting on
this,
that.
just to make sure I'm saying this correctly. This $21,000 is their bid to do this, exactly what we have here. We don't think we had to pay that whole $21,000, but we are committed to it from the Parks Department,
Correct.
period. But other funds will come in to help pay for that.
Right.
Correct? Or
CAPC
do we
pays
expect
us.
that they will write us a check and we will spend the money accordingly, or will they spend their money on what they want to spend their money on? Do you see what I'm asking?
I did not discuss that with them. They did say that they would commit $7,500.
Yeah.
And
It's just-
I would say that, you know, it in a way depends what we agree to later on when the thing evolves. I don't know what would work better than just say do a transfer of funds and then keep it clean that way. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a
I think
what's
it would
worth
keep
what.
it, I think it'd keep it clean.
I think
Yeah,
it'd keep it
yeah,
clean
yeah.
and
I
just
mean,
do a
I'm-
transfer over. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not too worried. If the other departments have actually said, yes, we will spend this money, I'm not worried about that. It's all the extra things. And the other thing I was going to ask about, the contract says that we need to provide insurance. Is that something that's already in place or something that's going to be an additional cost for us? I think
They provide
no, there was
insurance,
there was
but
insurance
we
for
also
both.
do.
Yeah, it was for both parties providing some
And I
insurance.
would imagine we,
That particular insurance was they provide insurance, of course, for
For their
the
part.
hazards, but then there's another piece that,
Right.
I can't find it right now, but there is an element in there.
yeah, it says
and-
buyer agrees to provide at its expense a general liability policy or special event insurance coverage in an amount sufficient to meet or exceed municipality or industry standards and all applicable requirements of local, state, and federal law, which I'm certain that we already
We already-
do.
I think we
Yeah.
already
For
do.
everything we have here, but it certainly needs to be.
And quite frankly, I think that would be on the city side, because that's and I
That's a
don't,
city thing.
I can't speak for them, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
But I know that when it comes like to our vehicles, they are self-insured.
Yeah.
Because I just did the recent vehicle, so I wasn't nearly as worried about that particular
It's quite
item.
likely it is in place, but I just want to make sure that wasn't an
Yes.
extra cost that wasn't
Okay.
covered when we agreed to
Yep.
this.
I think it would be using pre-existing,
Yeah, if you think about just having shuttles going up and down.
Yeah, we already have, these. we
bicycles,
have, we
to
have these
that.
insurance already, so.
but it's a good point, and I will, again, check on that
And they'll
one
want
as
proof
well.
of it, and they'll get that from the city, so that's good.
Do we need a motion to accept this?
Yeah, we will.
Well,
One of the reasons I think it's really important that maybe we haven't said is, if we are going to do it and we agree we're going to do fireworks, that's the first big question, right? And then how much is the next big question. But the reason it's so important right now is if we don't get committed to this right now, we won't get anybody to do them. And that's how far out they are to get this stuff. If we want to be on the schedule and we want this to happen, we have to commit to it so that they can put us on the schedule. Otherwise, we won't do it. And I think that's the reason why it's January 17th or whatever the date is today.
Right.
And we're doing this already and worried about July 4th, because if we don't, we miss our opportunity to have a supplier to do it. Am I correct in saying that?
I think you're correct,
Yes,
yeah.
you are.
And to Sue's point, as we move forward with, you know, looking exactly what we can accomplish, and the approval process would be there as we go forward. And that, I can make that also clear when I go to department head meetings, say, you know, we're in for this, but when it comes to the team and our plans, the amount of funds available to do these various things, that is a separate issue that needs to be decided. And I did not commit us in any way, shape, or form to additional funding.
Because at this point,
So-
it's very scalable. It could be, I mean, if you,
Yes.
it
yeah.
could be all people are doing is coming down there, getting on a blanket, watching fireworks, going home.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it could get down to that small of a thing.
Right.
and depending on what everybody works out on the teams, it can go big, but it is scalable.
Right, and the only thing we're really...
This is simply about fireworks.
Simply about
The only thing we're
fireworks.
committed
That's
to
it.
probably right now, Sue, is saying that if we do just the fireworks, that, yeah, we'd have some staffing to do, and that would be a cost to us, you know.
Yeah.
So.
And I would like to think that, especially the city, the CAP doesn't have a lot of staff that can help, but
True.
the city does, and I'd hope that they would contribute even to the the events setting up for this, not just be for the event if that's needed, and I say that because I've heard. I seemed like I was getting so tired of Scott coming to a meeting and saying we're putting up Christmas decorations. It just seemed to take forever, and it all fell on Parks. And I just want to make sure we don't.
I agree.
It has to be a team.
It's a
But
village.
Parks
We should be
Parks
doing
is-
it together.
Parks is obviously going to be a major contributor. They have to be if we're providing the grounds, but I want to make sure that it doesn't all fall on us and that people are really putting some skin in the game to make this happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think things are looking up in that regard, because I've been working really close with Simon, and Simon has been helping out a lot as far as giving, advice, and as far as the city is contributing. Like in the case of Crescent Springs, for example, we've got that pillar, the form we have to put behind the wall so that we can get access to where the water comes out, right? Well, the metal ring and the metal cover on that's going to be up against the hill. It's not going to be in the front. That's being supplied by the city. So there are efforts, I think, on both sides to contribute and make our projects work, and we just need to keep fostering that and keep working together. And like I said, when you have a new director, part of my job will be to make sure that I carry forward these programs and the relationships, get that person introduced to all the people, and then keep those relationships going. And I think there's a lot of effort, especially on the side of Public Works, to have a good relationship with Parks, because if you think about it, a lot of what we do is the same,
Yeah.
So.
And, I just said CAPC doesn't have a lot of staff,
True.
to put things on, but they are the people with the event planning experience. Parks is not it. So I hope they will also contribute in that way.
Oh, yeah, they did at the
make
meeting,
sure
as a
that,
matter of fact.
It doesn't all fall on the new director, that CAPC will take a heavy portion of that.
No, CAPC was probably one of the more vocal ones during the department head, saying, okay, we can do this and this and this and this. So they already had ideas about how they could shift resources around, like music in the park and various bands and things like that. So no, they're engaged without a doubt, and from that angle that you're talking about, and expertise more so than staffing on the ground. Yeah.
And like I said, it's been done before, multiple times for years, and lots of organizations in this town, including volunteer school groups, things like that. The firemen especially volunteer for all sorts of things. The city, everyone contributed, and it's an easy thing to ask people to help with. They all like to, for one thing. It turns out it's a fun thing. I never saw any lack of staff or worried about cleanup, things like that. There was always plenty of people to do things. So in
And
the
there's a
past,
very neat sign on the way into Eureka Springs coming from Rogers. It says Volunteer City 2019. I think it was 2019. And that would be good to revive that and get that volunteer spirit going again, that probably has suffered tremendously due to, COVID and the rest. I can't imagine that there aren't folks out there that would not enjoy getting out in the
it's
park
been a
and
while
helping.
since we had that volunteer,
Yeah.
I think 2012, 14, a few like that, then 19, and not since then.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to.
Yeah, I actually think the city is an incredible volunteer system. When you talk about the different organizations that exist and the different ways people are helping people. But I know a lot of people that are really fully committed in their volunteering.
Yeah.
That's more of a problem to me, of just having that extra capacity beyond what they're already doing for a lot of
Also,
people.
this isn't one of those events that draws a different set of people
Okay.
doing it just because it's 4th of July, because it's Independence Day. It's easy to get kid groups and scouts, things. I'm just throwing that out there. All
Right,
sorts of
okay.
things that I don't think it'd be that difficult.
Okay,
And
okay.
revenue streams. I still have all my old T-shirts I bought years ago that say Lake Leatherwood fireworks, things like
And
that.
Juanita's already on the T-shirt.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things you can spend money on
She's
that
looking at that.
and they'll spend money on it, and it'll be good.
Well, then I would like to make a motion.
Yes, please, Mark, go.
I move that we approve the fireworks display agreement as presented by Steve.
Okay, go ahead, start again. So,
Okay, I move that we approve the fireworks display agreement as presented by Steve. The current date on here is January 5th, which would probably not be the actual execution date, but And in the amount shown as $21,000.
I second it.
Okay, that's Mark, and Mary Ellen is a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Reluctant aye. I will vote aye.
Chair votes aye. Passes 4-0. The fireworks contract is approved. Thank you.
And I will have him update that to the proper date of
Okay.
today, which
Okay.
is the 17th.
And then Steve, yeah, you'll let us know what's going on with the other stuff too, so.
Yeah.
On the agenda later. And Mark with the finance committee, and y'all can figure out how to fix that on the budget for our next time we have to fix
Yeah.
things. Okay. We have an executive session on here to discuss a staff position employment. That is, we still need to discuss that, right? So Steve?
I would. It can be, when we get into it, I can make it as shorter, as more detailed as required. so.
If we're discussing, I actually have a question about this. It would seem to me that this, where the executive director has the right to do, hiring and firing. So it seems to me that this would be a budget issue for us to decide, assuming that promotions are going to involve some extra money. But I don't quite get why why that can't be done in public. What am I missing? Does this need to be executive discussion?
Maybe we're wrong, because we'll be discussing individuals that are staff and their employment, their actual employment, whether they will
Right.
So
still
will we-
working
will
at Parks
we-
or not, and what
So we
they're
were
being
talking about
paid.
number 5, right?
Yeah. Yes, number 5.
Okay.
Yeah. So will we be deciding who will be moving into those positions?
We won't be deciding, we will be,
It has to do with privacy, the individual privacy, and then after the thing, you come out and you say, okay, based upon in maintaining that privacy, you talk about any of the budgetary items that say, or alignment items that are part of that discussion, then those are part of the public forum. So no, and by no means is attempt to not put it in the public forum. It's just when you're talking about particular individuals,
Who are
that
currently
needs to be
employed.
done in executive
Yeah.
session.
I just want to make sure we're not overstepping what we've always allowed the executive director to do, which is be in charge of hiring, firing, and promotions.
it is, it's just that discussing this position and the budget that we already discussed with it, and an individual, and the circumstances with the individual, and what they're being paid, in order to have that discussion, you need to talk about that individual.
Oh, okay,
You need to
okay,
mention
I
what
got
he's
that.
being paid.
Yes, okay, I
and
get it.
whether he worked, and his actual employment there, and to keep that person's privacy to have the other discussion, it needs to start off in executive session. You may quickly find out you'll see that we can come right back out after we find out and do the other details in
Okay,
public.
okay, yes, if we are discussing...
And then we say, yes, it's your job to do this. If there's a
Okay.
budget decision, we can change it or whatever.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so
Then I would move we go into executive session to discuss staff position employment as outlined on number 5 of new business.
it's Mark. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mary Ellen, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We'll go into executive session at 7:20. Okay.
back to, I'm going to just say to end executive session.
Are you a left-hander?
I'm not. I'm
mean-
writing like I am right here, though, aren't I? That's how my brother, my little brother's a left-hander, and he does every.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. So we are done with executive session. We are back into regular meeting. Time is something.
7:41.
Thank you, 7:41. Okay.
And the
So
results of executive session.
there is no action, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say you do need to.
I have a little thing what it says here. We're back in regular session, and no action was taken, will be taken. Back to our new business. That was the only remaining items, because we're going to add those other three to our next agenda or special meeting, whatever we have to do when the full commission can be here. What's next?
approval of
Commissioner minutes.
Oh, Commissioner
Oh,
comments.
Commissioner comments. At this time, we have a chance to make little comments before we close the meeting. So you get to go first, even though you've already had a little time to do comments, Mary Ellen.
Well, I appreciate the openness that everybody has, and Sue's comments, I think, was very well done, and for Steve to give his comments, and I'm just happy to be here.
Good.
Hope I can be of use.
And welcome them. You
Yes.
absolutely will.
I'm glad you're here.
The only comment I have is I want to make sure that everybody feels the same way about, let's get this executive director thing done. I don't want to hold off for all of our candidates for much longer. So hopefully by next week, we can get a date set and get this special meeting on and get this done.
Have you interviewed these people?
Yes, there was three of us on a hiring committee. I don't know if that's what the
It was a committee, hiring
committee, and we all three interviewed all four candidates.
And you have all agreed on a candidate?
No, we haven't.
We have
That's
not- we have
that's what
not-
we will do
We
in
have
our.
not, we have not
session.
discussed the actual individual candidates at all.
Yeah. So we
No,
will do that.
We
in-
don't know
in
where
the meeting.
people are. different
Okay.
candidates.
Yeah, the process,
Yeah.
they'll bring that committee will bring to the whole commission their recommendations that they've weeded out all the things to the ones they recommend that we consider. And then
And
we'll-
so we have a chance to agree or disagree?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, so we received resumes, we then had a meeting where we reduced the number of people down, and the applications I gave you before the meeting are the people that we did interview and are currently under
Okay.
consideration.
And had you ranked them according to your,
We have not.
No,
then that's what we'll be meeting for then?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's-
Thank you.
And we will have executive session about that, but we wanted to make sure we had the whole committee and Carissa here for that, so we'll set up a special meeting time for that.
And when do you make that special meeting?
We'll send out a little note to see
When everybody's
when
available.
everybody can and when City Hall
I
can
know
help.
Laurie's out of town until the 24th,
24th, okay.
and Rod will be back in town this weekend, so he will be back to regular schedule.
So Sue, you will send us notes as to when we'll meet then? Is that your job, or?
Not necessarily, no. I kind of stepped in this week because I saw it wasn't happening, but
I'll
usually
probably start.
usually Steve has been sending things out, or Ruth
Yeah,
Ruth-
Stephen-
Ruth-
Stephen Al-
Ruth
Stephen
will
Al
probably
can
be the one
have to.
setting up the meeting.
And yeah, that Kim had the wrong place on the meeting agenda.
I know.
She fixed it.
Okay.
That's
No,
it. Mark,
yeah.
any other comments, Mark?
No more, no.
Okay. Sue?
No.
Nothing from me, really? Anything else to say before we check out today, Steve? All right. Let's motion to approve the meeting minutes from the previous meeting.
Yeah,
Um,
I should get the date. I think it was
Everybody have them?
I think it was
Yes.
December
Yeah, that's
13th, I think. They seem very disorganized
I don't
tonight.
have those ready either.
Yeah, it's December 13th was the meeting.
December 13th,
Did everybody get a chance to look at them?
I did.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve them?
I move to approve the meeting minutes from December 13th, 2022.
And I second.
That's Mark and Mary Ellen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. Motion passes 4-0. Minutes are approved from December 13th. I think that's it. Any other announcements or anything? A motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
And I second it.
We've done good
Discussion. I know
tonight.
y'all are just tonight. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. Motion passes 4-0. We are adjourned. Thank you. It is 7:45.
Well, it's kind of like Sue's too busy writing everything down, and
Just a quick little thing.